Welcome to our Week 15 NFL picks. Our first game of the week is Thursday Night Football. We have the San Francisco 49ers hosting the LA Rams. Now, last week, I did pick the Rams to beat the Buffalo Bills, and they did, in fact, get that W. That was a massive game in keeping their playoff hopes alive, and they really balled out on offense. Puka had like 160-something yards. Cooper Kupp nearly had 100 yards. They each had a touchdown. Matthew Stafford threw for over 300 yards. The final score ended up being 44-42, but it really wasn't that close. The Rams had a 2-score lead for pretty much the entire game. The Bills scored with like a minute left in the game. They couldn't get the onside kick, and it made the game look closer than it was, but they did have command for the majority of the game. And their offense is legitimately good. They have legit weapons. Kyron Williams is playing well, and Puka and Kupp are one of the best wide receiver duos in the league. And if Stafford's healthy, he can still ball. Their defense obviously needs some work. You're not going to win a lot of games 44-42. You can't give up that many points. Granted, they're playing the Buffalo Bills, and Josh Allen went absolutely ballistic. But if they can get that defense to play a little bit more consistently, I do think they're legitimately a good team. The Niners are coming off a 38-13 victory over the Bears, a game in which I did end up picking the Bears. I thought the Niners season was over, and mathematically it still is. I think they only have like a 7% chance to make the playoffs right now. But when they are healthy, they still have one of the best rosters in the league, and they just put on a show against Chicago. It was never really close. They absolutely beat them down at home, took care of business, no big deal. This game is in San Francisco again, so it is going to be a very hard game for LA. And, coming off that game against the Bills, that's a very important game. It's a very big win against a very good team. And it does make me a little bit nervous that now they have to go into San Francisco and get another victory. But for some reason, I just think they're going to. I think they're still fighting for that playoff spot. The remaining 4 games for these guys are the Niners this week, then they play the Jets, the Cardinals, and they play the Seahawks in week 18. So all of these games are massive for the playoff positioning. They're 1 game behind Seattle, and they play Seattle week 18. So they are right there. They could easily win their division. They're in a very good spot. This win would be massive for them. And because of that, because this win means so much to them, because they showed how powerful their offense can be against Buffalo, and because the Niners have been up and down this season and don't really have a lot to play for right now, I do think the Rams are going to win another big game this week on Thursday Night Football. Okay, let's make this back-to-back upset picks to start off week 15 because the Carolina Panthers are at home and they are favored against my Dallas Cowboys. Now, I understand why. The Panthers have been kind of progressing. They have been trending up a little bit, although they've still been losing the majority of their games. People do seem to be excited about Bryce Young. They do think that he is getting better. He does look more comfortable, and they are losing games by less points, I guess you could say. They almost beat Kansas City, they almost beat Tampa Bay, and they almost beat Philly. But people do seem to be, I guess, optimistic about them moving forward, myself included. And that Philly game, they should have won. Leggett or Legat, I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that name wrong for sure, but he dropped a pass that would have gave them the lead with like 50 seconds left in the game. They easily could have beat Philadelphia, which would have been a huge win for them. It wouldn't mean much, they're not going to make the playoffs, but it would have at least shown that they are trending up. Dallas, on the other hand, is coming off, just an unbelievable loss to Cincinnati. If you didn't watch the game, they blocked a punt, and that is what cost them the game, which doesn't make sense when you just hear it. It just doesn't. Dallas blocked a punt. We tried to recover it. It hit our guy, bounced backwards. Cincinnati got the ball, and it reset their downs. First down, drove down the field, scored a game-winning touchdown. It's an embarrassing way to lose. It's an atrocious way to lose, and really it's just a Dallas Cowboys way to lose. It's the most Dallas Cowboys thing that could possibly happen. But for this game, I do think Dallas is going to win. I think that Carolina is getting better. I do acknowledge that Bryce Young looks more comfortable than he has. They did almost beat Philadelphia. They did come within 3 points or so to Kansas City, but I still just have a hard time getting over the hump with them and picking them to win games. And I do think Dallas, even without Dak, has been playing decent. Cooper Rush has been okay. Rico Dowdle's been actually pretty good. And I don't know. This is probably just being biased, and this is really honestly just too bad to mediocre football teams right now. But I am going to take the Cowboys as an underdog going into Carolina on Sunday. Then we have the Browns hosting the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chiefs are coming off another nail-biting victory, this time against the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. They had a game-winning field goal that went off the upright and bounced in, and the noise around the Chiefs is only getting louder. I mentioned this last week. week, people, for good reason, I guess, but people do not like the Chiefs. People are tired of the close games. People are tired of the rest. People think that they're getting lucky. People think they actually aren't that good. And they're not really helping their case by just sneaking out win after win after win in just the most obnoxiously weird ways. But again, no matter how you swing it, they're 12-1. And the one loss, as I mentioned last week, is to the Bills, the Super Bowl favorite coming out of the AFC right now. The Browns, on the other hand, are fun at times. And Jameis, I think I also said this last week, but Jameis is genuinely fun to watch. And I do think he is pretty good. He's not consistent enough. He does make a lot of mistakes, but he does make some pretty nice throws. And Jerry Jeudy has been playing pretty well. But I don't think anybody, even the Chiefs doubters or the Chiefs haters, really think Cleveland is a good enough football team to hand this team a loss. And I think Kansas City is going to continue their winning ways. I think they're going to move on to 13-1, and we'll see how they finish the rest of the season. Then we have the Houston Texans hosting the Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins are coming off a win against the New York Jets that really just doesn't make a lot of sense. The Jets just continue to find ways to lose games. This is 3 weeks in a row the Jets should have won a game and just found ways to lose. And Miami was on the receiving end of that last week, which I'm sure they are happy about. And I don't think either one of these teams, Houston or Miami, is really thrilled with where they're at right now in the season. At least Houston is winning their division, so they can at least, sit on that. Their division's very bad, and they are probably almost for sure making the playoffs. I think they have a 96% chance of making it right now. But Miami has not been great. Obviously, Tua was out for a few games, and that obviously hurt them. They're in a really tough spot right now. They're fighting for their lives at 6-7. They need Denver to lose a couple games. They need Indianapolis to lose a couple games, and they pretty much need to win out. And I think one of the biggest problems with them right now is they are relying so heavily on the pass game. Tua threw the ball almost 50 times last week to beat the Jets. And they have weapons. Obviously, they have Tyreek and Waddle, and Tua's a good quarterback. Like, they have the weapons to throw, but if you have to rely on it, if Mostert has had injuries and Achane hasn't really had the year that I think people expected him to have, and so they are just consistently throwing, and it's just not producing the type of games they want to have. Onto the Houston side, CJ Stroud has had kind of a sophomore slump this year. They are 8-5. It's not that bad, but I don't think it's where they wanted to be. I don't think it's where people expected them to be either. But this game's at home. I do think these teams are pretty even. So since it's in Houston, I think I'm just going to give the edge to them. I think it could easily go either way. Miami is a little bit more desperate, but for some reason, I'm just feeling Houston in this one. So I am going to pick the Texans. And then we have another game, a back-to-back games involving the Jaguars, where I will be mad at myself if I watch a single snap. I just will. 2 3-10 teams, the Jets and the Jags, both seasons over. At least New York has some weapons that you might consider fun to watch. Jacksonville really doesn't have anything going for them right now. Jacksonville is coming off a game against Tennessee in which they scored 16 combined points between the two teams. Neither quarterback threw a touchdown, and Mac Jones blessed us with 2 interceptions. That was it. Nothing happened in that game. Nobody scored. Jacksonville snuck away with a 10-6 victory, but just not good. And like I mentioned, the Jets are continuously finding ways to lose. However, the Jets, their roster is just overwhelmingly better than Jacksonville. I do not know how New York is 3-10. I just don't. It doesn't make sense. I'll never understand it. And I continue to pick them every single week. I continue to get it wrong. But this one, they cannot lose to Jacksonville. They can't. They cannot lose to Mac Jones and the Jacksonville Jaguars. They just can't. I'm taking the Jets again. I will try very hard not to watch any of this game, and we'll see what happens. Then we have the New Orleans Saints hosting the Washington Commanders. Okay, so the Saints are coming off a victory against the Giants, and the Giants had a chance to win that game. They were driving down the field. They could have taken the lead, and I swear the New York front office had to have been absolutely sweating, praying, begging, pleading that they didn't score. There's no way they want to win any more games this season. And luckily for them, they didn't. The Saints ended up pulling it off 14-11 against New York. But does that necessarily make me feel great about the Saints? Probably not. Their defense is really bad. They're like 30th in the league right now in passing yards allowed. Derek Carr, I don't think, is playing in this game, and I just don't think they have a lot of hope for the rest of the season. Washington, on the other hand, they do have their own defensive struggles, but they're at least borderline elite on offense. Jaden Daniels is probably going to win Rookie of the Year. We'll see. Bo Nix is sneaking up on him for sure. Bo Nix is right around the corner, and if Jaden has a couple, lackadaisical games in a row, we'll see. I think Bo's right there, but Jaden's been balling. They've had a little bit of a slip the last month or so, but they're still good. Their offense is still very, very good, and even with their defensive struggles, I just don't think the Saints are going to be able to exploit that. So I think the Commanders are going to put up more more than enough points, more than enough yards. I think they're going to take care of business on the road in New Orleans. Then we have the Giants hosting the Baltimore Ravens, and this one should be pretty much automatic. Baltimore's a much better team. The Giants don't want to win games, or at least their front office doesn't, like we just mentioned. But Baltimore has lost some strange games this year. They lost to Vegas. They lost to Cleveland. Not sure how. They're coming off a bye week. The prior week they did lose to Philadelphia at home in probably their biggest game of the year so far. But that was a weird game. They beat out Philadelphia in almost every category. They had more passing yards, more rushing yards, more first downs, better third down conversion, longer time of possession. Like they pretty much statistically dominated that game. They just didn't win. So I don't know if you would necessarily feel horrible about them after that game. And Philadelphia is one of the Super Bowl favorites right now. In other words, I think Baltimore's going to be completely fine. They're 8-5. They definitely could use a couple more wins before the playoffs. They want to make a playoff push. They want to get into better seeding. They technically still have a chance at the AFC North, although it's probably not going to happen. But this game should be a layup for them. They should walk into New York. They should absolutely steamroll them, and they should just wipe their hands, move on, and be ready for next week. Then we have the Tennessee Titans hosting the Cincinnati Bengals, and we've talked about both of these teams' previous games already. The Titans-Jag game, like we mentioned, was very bad, and the Bengals-Cowboys game was unbelievable. Honestly, unbelievable. Cincinnati's been the same song and dance every single week. Their offense is absolutely electric, and their defense is just not enough. No matter how many points Cincinnati scores, the defense seems to allow more. And the Dallas game was an exception, but dude, we blocked a punt. Like we should have won that game. We block the punt, we recover it, we run the clock down, we kick a field goal, game over. The Bengals lose to the Cowboys. I don't know. I mean, am I happy the Dallas lost? Probably in the long term, yes. And I'll let it go. But just a bizarre way to end a football game. But no matter how it ended, Cincinnati, it's been the same thing. Joe Burrow absolutely lit it up. Joe Burrow had 369 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Jamar Chase had 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. And they barely snuck by Dallas. The defense just isn't there. They're bottom 3 in points allowed per game, and they're bottom 6 to 10 in almost every other statistical category on defense. Their season's over, and I don't know what they're going to do in the offseason. They need more than one piece. They have to fix something because Chase and Burrow should not be 5-8. They just shouldn't. Having said all that, but going into this game, no matter how bad Cincinnati's defense is, I just don't think Tennessee can take advantage of that. And Cincinnati's offense is so electric, there's just no way Tennessee's going to be able to keep up. I think Cincy's going to obliterate them. I just don't think it's going to be close. I think they're a much better team, and yeah, I think this one's easy. Then we have the Cardinals hosting the Patriots in Arizona, and the Cardinals are coming off a very tough loss against Seattle at home last week. They really needed that game in order to give themselves a chance at the division. They would have been tied with Seattle record-wise at the top of the NFC West, but they just didn't look, I don't know, they didn't look like they had the energy. Kyler threw 2 really bad picks. They scored the first possession of the game, and after that, it just didn't look great. I watched that game, and I'll admit I haven't watched a ton of Arizona games this year, but it just didn't seem like Marvin Harrison ever gets separation, at least on the plays that Kyler throws to him. It never looked easy, and he never looked explosive. And Marvin has had 2 games over 100 yards this year, but he's had 8 under 50 yards. I just don't think that the offense is looking like they expected it to, like their fans expected it to, and I'm curious what they're going to tweak in the offseason to change that. James Conner has been good. Their running game has been good. Kyler is part of that. But as a whole, this season is just disappointing, I would expect, for their fans and for their organization. The Patriots, on the other hand, have lost 4 out of the last 5 games. They do not look like they are, a complete football team right now. I've mentioned this before. I think Patriots fans are excited about Drake May, and it does seem like he is getting better each week, and he's consistently throwing for over 200 yards, which isn't like anything incredible, but for a rookie on a team that bad, it is a pretty good sign. I actually think this matchup is closer than a lot of people think, and even though it's in Arizona, I don't know. I just didn't like the mojo from that Seattle game I watched. And again, that's a small sample size for me, but I honestly think I'm going to take the Patriots in this game. I think it's closer than people expect. I don't think the Cardinals look great, and I think Drake May looks okay, and what do they have to lose? So I'm going to take the Patriots in this game. Next, we have the Broncos hosting the Colts in Denver, and this is a massive game for the AFC playoff picture. The Broncos are currently the 7th seed in the AFC, and the Colts are right behind them in the 8th spot on the bubble. They're 6-7. The Broncos are 8-5. So this is big. If Denver just beats Indianapolis right here, they're going to give themselves a really good shot at making the playoffs. But if Indy can sneak the upset, it's going to be a lot closer of a race than people expected. For Denver, Bo Nix is quietly sneaking up on Jay Daniels for that Rookie of the Year conversation like we talked about. And I think Denver fans are genuinely very excited about him. He looks like a legitimate NFL quarterback, and he is absolutely balling right now. This game is in Denver. It's massive. massive for both teams, and I just think Denver's a much better team right now. I don't trust a lot of what the Colts are right now, and Anthony Richardson is just not consistent enough to put your faith in right now. His completion rate is 47% on the season. 47%. To put that into perspective of how bad that is, the league average this season for NFL quarterbacks is 64%, and Anthony Richardson is throwing 47. That is a major red flag. He's 32nd in passing yards, 32nd in touchdowns, and he has 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions on the season. It's just not what you'd hope for as a Colts fan for the guy that you're, hoping can lead your franchise. I actually really like him, and I liked him coming out of college, and I hope he figures it out, but right now he is not there, and he's really not close. So I'm going to take Denver at home to beat the Colts and solidify their position in the AFC playoff picture. Okay, then we have the Detroit Lions hosting the Buffalo Bills, the game of the week. And again, I'm going to harp on this. The NFL has a scheduling problem. There are multiple games this season that no matter when you put the schedule together, you can just look at it and you can just mark a game and say, this is the best game of the week, no matter what, unless something drastic happens with some injuries. Bills Lions, before the season started, is automatically a better game than Seattle Green Bay in every scenario. There is no reason this should not be Sunday Night Football. It doesn't make sense to me. And they did it earlier this season with the Bills Chiefs game as well. Everyone knows Bills Chiefs is going to be a good game. It's going to be a game that everyone wants to watch. It's going to have major implications on the playoffs, and they slotted at 225. I don't get it. I do not understand the NFL's schedule policy or their process or whatever it is. It doesn't make sense. They need to figure it out. This should be Sunday Night Football. Okay, having said all that, listen, I told you I picked the Rams to beat Buffalo last week, and that did happen. Now, Josh Allen is legitimately Superman of the NFL. This man had 342 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. And he was also the leading rusher on his team with 82 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, combining for 6 total touchdowns in one game. He's got MVP literally locked up as far as I'm concerned, and he is just carrying this team on his back. The Lions are coming off that very close game against Green Bay last Thursday night. A game in which, Dan Campbell, if I was a Lions fan, I know everyone loves him. I love him. I think he's a great coach. I love listening to his halftime speeches, locker speeches, whatever. His decision-making scares me, legitimately scares me. And if I was a fan, I do not know how I would process it mentally. This man went for it on 4th and 1 from his own 30 with a terrible play call, halfback pitch. Terrible play call on 4th and 1. And to end the game, instead of kicking a field goal to take the lead on 4th down, he went for it so that they could put the game away. And it worked. Granted, it worked. And I know Lions fans, I'm sure, were happy. And Dan got a lot of compliments, after that game. But that makes me very nervous for the playoffs. If he pulls something like that in the playoffs and it goes the wrong way, where he could have just taken a lead and trusted his defense, or he could have just punted the ball away, played the field position game, like that can cost you a playoff game, especially against, top tier opponents, like if they play Philadelphia or someone like that. I am a Dan Campbell believer. Trust me, I like Dan Campbell. I promise I do. But man, I watched that game live and I was shocked by some of the decisions that he made. Granted, again, it did work. So I can't say a lot, but I am very curious how it's going to play out in the playoffs. Let's just say that. Now, in terms of who I think is going to win this game, my Super Bowl favorite right now is Detroit. I think Detroit is the most complete team in the NFL. I do think they're the best team in the NFL. They're my favorite to win the Super Bowl. Having said that, I don't think Buffalo's going to lose 2 games in a row. I think, Detroit has won like 11 games in a row. I think they haven't lost in like 3 months. And it's kind of like when I picked the Rams over the Bills. Like, do I understand and know that the Bills are better than the Rams? Yes. Did I have a feeling that it was just going to happen, that the Rams were going to pull off a victory? The Bills had won like 8 in a row at that point. The Rams needed a victory and they got it. I kind of feel that way now. I think if I had to pick a Super Bowl favorite, like I said, it would be Detroit. But I do think Buffalo is going to sneak this game in Detroit from them. I do. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be a very good game. It could go either way. I don't feel super confident about this pick, but I just think that Buffalo is going to fight back. I think they're going to want to redeem themselves after last week's loss, and I think they're going to beat Detroit on the road, and we'll see. This could be a Super Bowl preview, but who knows? Then we have the Chargers hosting the Buccaneers at home in LA. The Chargers are coming off that game that we talked about in Kansas City where they almost had it. The doink field goal won the Kansas City the game. Devastating way to lose as a Chargers fan, I'm sure. But this team has been solid. Justin Herbert's been really good. Statistically, passing yards wise, he's not at the top of the league, but he's thrown 14 touchdowns and only 1 interception. He's been very efficient. And the Chargers just don't have a consistent pass catcher for him. No matter what happens this season in the playoffs or how far they go, their number one priority needs to be a wide receiver for Justin Herbert. They can't waste these Herbert years on him throwing drag routes to Quentin Johnson that he drops. They just can't. But their defense has also been very, very good this season. Their secondary has been excellent, and their defense has allowed the fewest points of any other team this season. Baker Mayfield's also had a really good year this season, and it's been a lot of fun watching him lead that team. Tampa's biggest strength right now is moving the ball, passing the ball. Their offense has been solid. They are struggling on defense right now. They're 30th in opponent pass yards per game, and they're going up against Justin Herbert, who could hang 300 yards in their heads easily. I think because LA's defense is so strong and they can probably slow down Baker and Tampa's defense is struggling, and Herbert at any moment could put up a massive game, I am going to take the Chargers at home. Then we have another very good game, another game that could be a primetime game, but I guess it's just not happening this week. The Eagles are hosting the Steelers in Philadelphia. Both of these teams have absolutely elite defenses right now. They're both coming off wins. Philadelphia beat Carolina in that game that we talked about. They definitely could have lost, but they didn't. And the Steelers had revenge against the Browns and beat them at home. But like I said, these two defenses are absolutely elite right now. Philly's defense is in the running for the best defense in the league, and Pittsburgh is not far behind them. The differentiating factor for me is that I think Philly's defense is better than Pittsburgh's just by a little bit, even if it's a slim margin, or even say they're sixes. Then we move to the offense, and I just think Philly has more weapons offensively than Pittsburgh does. Saquon's on his MVP campaign. He's for sure going to win Offensive Player of the Year, if not MVP. And if they slow him down, which Pittsburgh might, they have the 4th best rushing defense in the league right now. They still have Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Like, their offense is just built with weapons, and Pittsburgh has done enough to win a lot of games this year, but I don't think they have the firepower to match up with Philly. So as I do think these teams are very close as a whole, I just think Philly has the slight edge, and it's also in Philadelphia right now, a home game. I think all the small factors are leaning towards the Eagles, so I'm going to pick them in this game to beat the Steelers. Then we have the Seahawks coming off that massive win against the Cardinals in Arizona, like we talked about. They are now at the top of the NFC West all by themselves at 8-5. And honestly, Geno, at times he looks legitimately good. And I know people are up and down on him. I'm up and down on him. But that Arizona game I was watching, I'm like, kind of nice. And Seattle has legitimate weapons on offense. Kenneth Walker did not play against Arizona. Charbonnet absolutely killed it. JSN had one of his career games. DK's just sitting there. DK Metcalf, he was like a second option. And Tyler Lockett is a third option right now on that team. And Noah Fant's been solid at tight end. They just have a lot of people they can get the ball to offensively, which is probably one of the reasons why Geno's second in the league in passing yards this season. Green Bay looks solid in that Detroit game. They obviously could not come up with a W, but they're coming into Seattle as 3-point favorites on the road, which to me, it does seem a little bit disrespectful. I think Green Bay is probably a slightly better team, but being a 3-point favorite on the road in Seattle seems a little crazy to me. I think Seattle has weapons. I think they're fighting for something. They need that playoff spot. They're playing at home. They're being disrespected with that line in Vegas, and I'm going to take the Seahawks to beat the Packers at home. Then we have a doubleheader this Monday night. The first game of the night is the Vikings versus the Bears, and I went on this entire rant last week about the Bears and how they finally got rid of Eberflus. They've lost 4 games by a combined 10 points. They probably have good mojo now. They at least got rid of their coach. They're improving every week. They've been this close to winning a bunch of games, and they just got absolutely bulldozed by the Niners. So I don't know. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the Bears are the Bears. I don't really know. They're 4-9 at this point. Could they easily have 4 more wins, 5 more wins? Sure. But the new coach theory, Bill Simmons' new coach theory, it just did not happen. They just got steamrolled. And the Vikings, on the other hand, these are 2 of the teams I've been wrong the most on. I just continuously believe that the Bears will figure it out, and they don't. And I also have been kind of doubting the Vikings all season, and they just somehow, no matter how ugly, just keep pulling out these wins. I also did go back and watch their game against Atlanta, and it was closer than the score showed. The game was tied, I think, going into the 4th quarter, or maybe at the end of the 3rd quarter. I'm not quite sure when. Minnesota scored right after that to take a 7-point lead, and then Ray McLeod fumbled the kickoff return. Minnesota immediately scored right after that. So now it's a 2-score lead, and Atlanta just collapsed in the 4th quarter. But they got the dub, It was a 20-point victory. And I don't care what you say about Sam Darnold, specifically what I say about Sam Darnold. I maybe have doubted him a little bit this year. Whatever you say about him, the man is not scared to throw the ball downfield. There were multiple passes in that Atlanta game where he just hucked the ball in the sky, and either Addison or Jefferson just comes down with it and somehow gets 7. It's crazy to watch, honestly. And what better guys to have chasing your long passes than Addison and Justin Jefferson? So I don't know. I think they're officially elite. They're 11-2. This should be a layup for them if, they're taking themselves seriously at home playing a bad Bears team. They should be 12-2 after this week. I'm going to pick Minnesota, and I swear to you, if this week I finally pick Minnesota and don't pick the Bears and the Bears win, I give up. I just don't. That cannot happen. I'm picking Minnesota on Monday Night Football. Okay, then our last game of the week is the Raiders hosting the Falcons in Vegas. Now, the Raiders we've touched on before. There's really not a lot to talk about. They're just not very good at football. They've won 2 games all season. And the Falcons, they've kind of fallen off, and they really might be out of the playoff push right now. They still can make it, but, some things would have to happen. And something I pulled away from that Vikings-Falcons game that I told you I watched, Kirk Cousins historically has been at least an average to above average quarterback, and he's clearly just not on that level this year. And one of the biggest things is just he's completely immobile. Like, I know he's older now, and I know they expected that, but when he's in that pocket, he cannot move around. He can't escape the sack. It's just getting to a point that's genuinely concerning, and I do wonder if they're going to bring Penix into this game. No matter what happens, lucky for them, they play Vegas. It doesn't really matter who plays quarterback. They should walk away with this win easily, especially considering they desperately need it to keep their playoff hopes alive. So I'm going to take Atlanta to beat the Raiders in Vegas. This should be a lock, but it's Atlanta, so really, who knows? Thank you guys so much for watching my Week 15 picks. If you liked the video, please like the video and consider subscribing for future videos like this.